Okay, so now it's time to move on to the master effects. In contrast to the insert effects, the master effects only occur following the amp and before the master output. So if we go to the routing page, you can see that you can select the inserts to occur in different places in the processing chain. But the master effects only occur after the amp section and before the master output. So remember that it's just the last finishing touches that you're putting on your sound before they are output. So if we move up to the tabs, we can see we have two options, and each of them has a drop-down menu to select a type of effect, and we'll go through those in a moment. With each type of master effects that you choose, these 4 parameters will have different headings, and each of them pertains to the particular type that you've set. Now, some of these have different formats, positive and negative, monophonic or polyphonic, and you can see that here in the drop-down menu. So, for example, it will say flanger -1, which means a negative flanger, plus it has a 1, which means mono. But if it's in the stereo version, it will just say phaser, so that you can just tell that by looking at the heading there. So now let's just go through these effects so we can describe what they accomplish. First, we have reverb. Reverb creates a space for your sound. It locates it in an actual acoustic space. A small reverb is similar, but as you might imagine, it has a smaller size. So you can hear if the size is all the way up, the reverb small still has a much smaller size than the normal reverb. You can think of the normal reverb as like a cathedral, and the small reverb is more like a room or something like that. Now let's move on to the flanger. What does a flanger do? It slightly delays your signal, and then it will vary the delay time of that delayed signal, and that's what creates the flange effect. In this master effects, you can adjust the rate, the feedback, and the depth. The chorus adds voices and pitches each one differently, and then modulates that pitch spread. And that just kind of adds a little bit of richness to the sound and a little bit of dimension as well. Here you can adjust the rate, the offset, and the depth. The ensemble chorus uses 4 different modulation signals, so that just sort of enhances the sound and gives you a nice fat chorusy sound. Next, let's look at the phaser. So what does the phaser do? Well, the phaser will send the signal through several all-pass filters and then modulates the frequency over time. So you can hear some of that movement in the bandwidth shifting. So next will be delay. This delays the audio signal and reproduces it. It's a little bit similar to the simple delay down in the insert, but you have some more parameters here. You can change the time for the left and the right to create some stereo effects. And then you also have a dampening knob here. This will adjust the high frequencies of the delayed signal. So if this knob is all the way up, the delayed signal is just as bright as the dry signal. If you pull this dampening knob down, then the delayed signal is a little bit duller and the higher frequencies are filtered out. That sounds more natural, like what a real delay would sound like in an acoustic environment. You can also choose a delay synced master effects. That will be synced up to the global clock, and you can use the ratio selectors for each left and for the right stereo stereo position. So you can sync them up in different ratios, which is pretty cool. Create some cool stereo effects there. The feedback will be the length of time that the delayed signal carries on. So the sync delay is a lot of fun. I use that a lot. The dimension expander I also use a lot too. It's kind of like a delay and chorus combined. It just adds some spatial dimension to your sound. It's a little bit more subtle than the reverb and the delay, but it's a little bit it will widen your sound, make it sound bigger and fuller. And then lastly, we have some tube effects. So these are just sort of virtual representations of going through a tube amplifier. It gives some warmth to your sounds, a little bit more analog, and you can push these to the extremes and create some drive. The Teletube is another tube amplifier master effect. It uses less CPU than the classic tube, so that's a good thing to remember if you're running low on CPU power. It's a little bit softer of a distortion. And the Bronner tube is similar, but it's a little bit brighter than the Teletube. I like using these tube effects because they'll give you a nice transient at the beginning of your sound. So those are the different master effects that you can choose. You can obviously apply none of them by deactivating them or having them set on none. And we might as well now talk also about the EQ, which is right next to the master effects. We have a low shelf and a high shelf, a boost knob, and a frequency knob. So when we activate this EQ, you can hear what these knobs do. You can reduce the low frequencies by pulling down this low shelf knob. The boost knob is a little bit like a resonance knob, and it will boost the signal wherever you set it to be on this frequency knob to the right of it. And then, similar to the low shelf, you have a high shelf that will reduce the higher frequencies. So that's how those 4 parameters within the EQ work. It's good to play with these when you're building your patches because some of the processing that you apply will probably require some equalization, and it's good to do that before it's sent into your sequencer. And then double-clicking resets all of these to the middle. So we've gone through the master effects and the EQ, and those are fun to play with to put some finishing touches on your sound at the end of your processing chain. So that's Master Effects. We will see you in the next lecture.